you walk into the women's restroom and there is a secret door, like a trap door of sorts, cut into the wall, literally, almost just like it was plywood. And you walk through that door and you go back around the back of the building. You go a couple hundred yards in this really narrow alleyway that in the middle of the night, I would imagine is pitch black dark, right?
Yeah.
And then you come to a big clearing with numerous structures. And when you go into those buildings, it was heartbreaking. I mean, it was just mattresses lined up on the floor. Hey, welcome to the Elijah Rising podcast, where we discuss the myths, misconceptions, and most asked questions about sex trafficking. I'm Adam, and today I am joined by our very own David Gamboa, Director of Communications. Welcome, David.
It's good to be on the podcast. You know, I'm usually on the other side of the camera.
It's true.
But it's my turn now.
You really do make the podcast what it is. So for those of you who don't know, David is like the technical guru of all things Elijah Rising. So he's normally behind the scenes with most stuff. But that's not all you do.
Yeah.
What else do you do, David?
Well, I used to lead Cantina intervention, which funny story. When my first time volunteering with Elijah Rising, I'm coming to intervention. I'm like super psyched. You know, we're going to go out into these places and you know, help women.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I'm just going to be with a team. I'm just going to hang back. And our founder at the time pointed me out in the middle of like worship, and it was like, "You're going to lead the Cantina team."
Wait, this was your first time?
My first time at intervention.
All right.
And I was like, "What do you mean? I don't even know where they are. I don't even know what they are. I don't even know." And so I just kind of did it and went along with it. We're much more organized now.
Yeah.
We have procedures and stuff, but and that was kind of something I just kept coming back and doing.
Yeah. Wow. And if some of you are recognizing his last name, yes, he is married to our executive director, Micah Gamboa. They are the power couple around here these days. And so, I'm happy to have you on the podcast. And today you've kind of already touched on it a little bit. But this first episode, we're going to talk about the Cantina model and the way that trade works in particular. So tell us, David, since you have a lot of experience doing intervention in the cantinas, what is a cantina and how do they operate, in specific reference to sex trafficking? Yeah,
so a cantina is essentially like a bar. You know, we get the question a lot of times, like, is it a restaurant? Because, you know, we think of Papacito's Cantina, we think of El Tiempo Cantina.
Right.
These are different. These are bars. You walk in, and it's usually really dark. There's usually lights, loud music. Yeah. There's a bar area. They don't take credit cards. There's an ATM machine in the side.
Right.
And you see women, kind of scantily clad women, lined up against the bar or against a wall.
Yeah.
And so the way a cantina works is guys go in and they'll purchase a beer. It might be a $5 beer, it might be a $15 beer, or it might be a $70 beer.
Right.
And sort of that transaction is how they're able to sort of operate under the guise of a bar, where essentially it's acting as a brothel.
Right. So you're not just purchasing like a food item or a drink, you're actually purchasing a person.
Yeah.
And the tab is the same. It just looks like you're purchasing, you know, drinks or whatever.
Yeah, and it varies. I mean, some people go in there just to kind of flirt with the women, and so they'll purchase beer kind of just for their time, but there's also guys that are going in there purchasing women, either going off into, you know, a side room or a nearby hotel,
right,
and where the sex act is performed.
So, you know, cantina is kind of a pretty common word. I mean, obviously it's a Spanish word, right? And so we see like chain restaurants. So I guess the question that we often get in reference to this is like, are all cantinas brothels? If I see cantina on a sign, does that mean it's a brothel?
Yeah, cantina, it just means a bar or a place to gather. You know, if it's a restaurant, odds are it's probably not a illicit cantina brothel where
like if
women
you have to
being
make a reservation for a meal.
Yeah, or even if they take credit cards. I mean, these places are really shady.
Yeah.
You'll see when you pull up. I mean, a lot of the times Even like the front doors are like boarded. Like it's like you don't want to go in here,
Right.
but you go around the back and there's like 50 or so cars,
Yeah.
and people were coming in and out. And so it's not really a place that you're going to say that's really appealing. I want to go inside.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So not all cantinas are brothels. And these are primarily, another term that people will use is called pony bars.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of another just colloquial way that's referred to in the trade. Right. Okay. So again, this is one of the ways that sex trafficking happens in Houston, but it's not just Houston. There are other areas in the nation where the cantina kind of model works, but Houston in particular has a pretty horrific history of sex trafficking in cantinas. So why don't we talk about a few of those cases, maybe one or two from our own work at Elijah Rising. Can you think of any that stand out to you?
Yeah, and they've really been just so shocking or horrific that cantinas have garnered the name of like the Houston model of trafficking. Not that it's just unique to Houston; it's just some of the cases are so egregious.
Right.
Like La Costanita. I know you were around when we were doing van tours and going by that place, and you actually have experience going into La Costanita.
Yeah, in the early days of Elijah Rising, we did a lot of things. We were just like figuring it out. We started as a prayer meeting, and we knew that we needed to raise awareness, and we also recognized the need to like just do intervention. Like we just got to get out there. We got to meet women where they're being trafficked, where they're being sold. And La Costanita was, as you said, like this pretty famous, like well-known cantina bar where trafficking was just so obviously taking place. Like it really wasn't that hidden when you went in. And so there in those days, we would staff and some volunteers would just go into these places, much like we do on intervention now, but with a lot less structure.
Yeah.
We just kind of went in and just looked around and tried to find an opportunity to talk to somebody. And so I remember going into La Costanita at one point, and it is exactly as you just described, David. You did a really good job, right? I mean, like it's dark, but with like strobe lights and bumping music, very loud music.
Super loud.
Yeah. And I think they had like a pool table in there and a little dance floor, some tables and things like that. And it was just very obvious. Like, and what was craziest about that experience was it was the first time I had ever been into a cantina, and the amount of women. I mean, there were tons of women. I think that night, like 20, 30 or so women that were just literally lined up by the bar and on the dance floor. It was just so evident what was happening there. But then it got shut down. It got raided. And the owner of the property and the trafficker in the case, who happened to be a female in that instance, they were arrested and they stood trial. And it actually made the news. I think it made national news.
I think they ended up, helping 84 women.
That's right.
Including, women or girls as young as 14.
That's right. Yeah. And you're jogging my memory now. Yeah. And I believe some of the assets that were recovered from those who were involved in the trafficking were actually given back to the women as reparations for their enslavement, essentially. And then what we would do, and this was before you came on board, because it was such a huge success. I remember having a prayer meeting in the parking lot of La Costanita one night, praying for it to be shut down. And then what we would do is on the first kind of iteration of our van tours is like it was like a trophy a little bit. Like, look, man, this is what the power of prayer, the power of intervention can do, shut down this massive place. And so we went in there after it was shut down, and I walked through it with a couple of other staff members. And here's what was craziest about this place, David. I had been in the bar when it was operating. But then when it was shut down, nobody was there. It was an abandoned piece of property. When you went through the restroom, so you walk into the women's restroom and there is a secret door, like a trap door of sorts, cut into the wall, literally, almost just like it was plywood. And you walk through that door and you go back around the back of the building, you go a couple hundred yards in this really narrow alleyway that in the middle of the night, I would imagine is pitch black dark, right?
Yeah.
And then you come to a big clearing with numerous structures. And when you go into those buildings, it was heartbreaking. I mean, it was just mattresses lined up on the floor, one after the other. And there were some rooms, some had doors, but some of them were like mattresses right next to each other. And because the place was raided and everybody was removed, just instantly one night, I mean, people's things were still there.
Wow.
Women's clothing, all of the things that you would assume would be in a location where 80 women are being trafficked at any given point. It was all there. All the evidence was there. It was really disturbing.
Yeah.
To be quite honest. And that's a really big case, but that's
and the crazy thing is you might be asking the question, like 84 women in one place, like why can't law enforcement just go in and kick the doors down? And La Costanita was interesting because it was the TABC
that's right,
part of it, and a member of the trafficking ring spotted the TABC agent in a sedan and like took off, dropped his keys.
That's right.
And because the agent was able to get the keys, he was able to get into the place and discover what was going on.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, TABC had already been looking at the place because they were making so much money selling Bud Light out of an ice chest.
Yeah.
Like, or, whatever it was, right? Just money, like crazy money, hand over fist selling bottles of beer. Like they didn't have, anyways, it just, you're right. And so, and because of the way that it was built, it was so hidden, all the privacy fences, the secret door through the women's restroom, right? It was hard to really know what was going on. But again, I mean, we targeted that place in prayer, in intercession, and in intervention. And if you drive by that location today, it's just a concrete slab.
Wow.
It's not there anymore.
Yeah. I remember they tore it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember actually meeting the chairman of the TABC. It's kind of new. This was maybe a year or 2 years ago. And he told me the most surprising thing about his job was the emphasis on trafficking and how TABC has a whole squad that's dedicated to uncovering trafficking rings. And he thought he was just going to be dealing with, liquor licenses and bars and clubs. And it was just a whole new world to him. But really, this was the beginning of collaboration amongst law enforcement, like FBI,
right,
ICE, Harris County.
Yeah, in those days, I do remember after the shutting down of La Costanita, it felt like every couple of months a new major cantina operation was getting busted. I remember one day coming home from work and sitting on the couch, and somebody texted me and said, "Hey, turn on ABC 13," and it was a helicopter camera shot of another big cantina that we had been driving by doing awareness and intervention at, and it was getting raided in the middle of the day, And so you're right. I mean, it did really pick up the collaborative effort, not just between agencies like ours, but with law enforcement and other government agencies to start shutting these down.
Yeah, and there's multiple parts to it. So you have people who are traffickers, who are really looking for women in Mexico, Central America,
right?
Either forcing them, frauding them, coercing them into coming to the United States under the guise of, you're just going to work as a waitress at a restaurant.
Right.
And so you have the people that are facilitating the smuggling and the trafficking, but they work in tandem with the cantina owners. So the people that are owning these establishments.
Right.
And what made it so difficult for law enforcement the owners of the cantinas would change the name of who the owner is, or they transfer it to a family member.
Right.
So all the charges that are, building up against these cantinas, how do you place those on the new owner?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And so they created like this crazy paper trail that law enforcement had a really difficult time dealing with.
Yeah.
And, another big cantina was the New Backdoor Club.
I remember.
Also known as Las Palmas, and that was raided in 2013. But that club had like 17 sex rooms upstairs.
Yeah.
And this is just out in the open in Houston, Texas.
Yeah. That place was crazy too, because their street, the part of that business that faced the main street all, like you said, all the windows were boarded up. It looked like it was abandoned.
Yeah.
But when you would turn the corner to go one block behind that location, on any given night almost of the week, you would go back there and you'd see hundreds of cars and just a parking lot bustling with activity, taco trucks and security personnel and just people coming and going and going and going. But if you're just a resident going down the main street there, it looks like, oh, just another abandoned piece of property in this neighborhood. But it was huge, 17 sex rooms upstairs, and I believe that location too. There was also minors that were being trafficked and that were rescued in that raid. Okay, so this is a good intro into how the Cantina trade in Houston and other places works. We're going to take a break for just a second. When we come back, we're going to talk about what do cantinas look like today and what Elijah Rising is doing on intervention with them currently. So stick around.
Hey everybody, I hope you are enjoying today's episode of the Elijah Rising podcast. Right now I'm standing in the Elijah Rising store that sells goods that empower survivors of sex trafficking. All the items in this shop, the purchases support the employment as well as the restoration of women that are in our program. So please come visit us at 11th and Studewood or online at shop.elijahrising.org. And today on your first purchase, we're going to offer you $10 off if you shop online using code PODCAST.
Hey, welcome back to the Elijah Rising podcast. So let's talk a little bit about what cantinas look like today. I kind of told some stories about the early days in Elijah Rising's work, but you've been doing cantina outreach a lot more frequently and more recently than I have. So is this still a thing? Like, are these cantinas still prevalent in Houston today?
Yeah, I mean, on the East End and the Ship Channel of the Houston area, I mean, you can go one block and there will be 5 or 6 of these cantinas, right on the same street, adjacent to each other. They're mostly in the Ship Channel, but we're even beginning to see them in Northwest Houston. Even in the Heights area, we just
that's true.
redid our van tour route, and there was a 2 or 3 cantinas kind of on that in that area. And so they do look the same. It does look like your typical kind of just rundown looking bar.
Yeah.
Looks shady. They're not as large as I think some of these previous cases we talked about.
Right.
Where they had like 17 upper rooms and, all these women held in one place. We see a lot of women being transported by like vans to multiple different locations. So one month we might be in the Ship Channel area, and then the next month we'll be in Northwest Houston. Sometimes we'll see the same women.
Oh wow, being trafficked between 2 different locations.
Yeah. And so there's not as many women as you were saying. You walked into La Costanita and there was just like tons of women. Now there's just a handful of women in these bars. Of course, we go from 9 to 11, so it's not the busiest hour like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m.
before peak hour of
but they're still prevalent, and they're still operating, and they still use the same model of purchasing beer to purchase women and that whole thing. And, another thing is, we didn't talk about this in the first part, but the prevalence of the occult, and like a lot of the cantinas, they'll have like garlic on the door, Santa Muerte images throughout the building. And it's really ritually abusive to the women who are there. And I don't know if you want to share about experience you had.
Yeah, actually, a number of the cantinas that we first started doing intervention in, I remember like we would walk in and there would be shrines of sorts set up and all sorts of like religious or ritualistic paraphernalia that would go along with that. And actually in our Museum of Modern Day Slavery, we have some of those things. There's an installment in the museum where we kind of touch on this, and you can see some of those items that we found in the field. And I remember one cantina in particular, we opened a door, and it was there was a room, and the entire room was dedicated. It was like an altar to Santa Marta, and it just seems to be part of the system of not just the trafficking, but the traffickers and the business model of sorts, because they pray for, the business and things like that. So I'm glad you brought that up. There's an interesting connection there.
Yeah. And there's an element of just psychological bondage there, because many of the women, they might be staying at, their own apartment or their own home or someone else's home.
Right.
And, they're free to go to the grocery store. They're free to go different places. And so a lot of people, they have a hard time figuring out, well, why don't you just leave? Like, if this is so terrible.
Yeah.
But they don't understand is like these people that are trafficking the women understand where their families are back in Mexico, back in Central America.
Right.
And, you know, a lot of times those things are held against them. Like we remember going to a Cantina on North Main, and we were talking with a girl there, and she was sharing how she was brought over from Honduras. She thought she was coming to work as a waitress.
Right.
And so she had 2 kids that were staying back in Honduras with family. And that night she was really troubled because her oldest son went missing. And she thought it was unusual that we showed up because we were Christians and we were offering to just pray. And she was a believer herself. And she was telling us about how she used to go to church back in Honduras and how she still prays to God to help her out of the situation. And so we just began to pray with her over her kids and just that they would be found. And something happened. She just began to open up and share. She was like, hey, when you guys walked in, like I had a migraine and it totally left.
Wow.
And I was like feeling depressed. And then you guys brought just like this presence with you guys. And so she pulled us outside and we're on the front steps of this cantina. And she's telling us all this, her story of how she's came from Honduras and is working at this cantina in Houston. And we shared with her, you know, hey, there are resources. There are people that can help. You know, she was in trouble with law enforcement. So she was, you know, really terrified of being deported.
Right,
and,
right.
you know, it was a complex situation. And she still had sort of this debt that was kind of looming over her. And so we just began to pray with her and begin to connect her with Rescue America and some resources. But that night, I mean, she made a decision, like she wants to leave and not come back to that club.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we think, you know, every woman in the cantina, you know, has some sort of pimp. Some of them are, it's almost like they're trafficked by their situation. Like I remember going to a cantina and it was this lady's first time. So I'm sitting at the bar and I'm just strike up a conversation and say, hey, we're with the church and you know, we're just here to help people. And if you need anything, just let us know. I have some resources for you. And she just began to talk to me because she didn't know anybody. And I said, well, you know, how long have you been here? Have you been here before? And she was telling me how this was her first night. And she was a single mom in Corpus Christi. She had 3 kids and her husband abused her. So she ended up leaving him and she wasn't working at the time. She wasn't able to find work. And so she found a friend that just somehow got her connected to coming into this cantina and selling herself. Wow. And so she drove from Corpus to Houston that night. And
that same night that you found her.
That same night, yeah.
Wow.
And we just began to tell her, you know, you didn't want to scare her, but at the same time, I wanted for her to understand how dangerous it was. And so I think it was good that we were there just to provide her with the resources. And after that night, you know, we never saw her again.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I think you're bringing up a point that we have said numerous times on the podcast, and we say, you know, when we go and speak places or when people ask questions, but I think it's worth repeating again and again that this whole situation, sex trafficking, really is the exploitation of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And the stories that you're telling right now and the stories that, you know, we continue to tell, which are so important because it gives a larger understanding of how this all occurs, is these individuals are being exploited, but the factors that bring them to that place is their vulnerability. I mean, you know, that woman in particular, she's coming from an abusive marriage. She has numerous children, right? And so she sees no other way. Also, she has somebody influencing her that says this is a way, right? And then she ends up in this cantina. And fortunately, by the grace of God, you know, our team, you in particular, you know, you were there to intervene. But that happens over and over and over again, doesn't it? I mean, most of these women are there because there's some vulnerability, whether it's poverty, hunger, or homelessness, or immigration even, is being exploited, and then they find themselves in these situations.
Yeah, it's that, or it's like MS-13 gang members like burned down your business and forced you into this. So
Right.
it can also be very violent in nature, but sometimes it is just kind of exploiting that vulnerability and taking advantage of someone when they're already down.
Right.
And it's heartbreaking to hear the stories.
Yeah.
And I think it's important though that when we go into the cantinas, the whole goal of our interventions is built on a relationship model, and the people that we're able to help most effectively are the ones that we develop relationships with, that we're seeing every month, and we're able to understand sort of where they're coming from and the complexities of helping them, because it's not just getting into a shelter.
Right.
I mean, that's one step of like a myriad of, they have, charges against them. They have legal issues. Some of them might not even be, have their license or basic documents that you need to kind of build your life.
Right.
And so building that relationship is key. And a lot of the women look forward to our teams actually coming because, we're not there to take advantage of them or exploit them. We're just there to be sort of a light in the dark and to be present in these places that really, they see it super odd that church people, I mean, that we get so many stares because these people are like, what, you don't belong here. Like I remember a previous intervention, we were at a cantina, and the guard, they all have guards at the door.
Right.
And he was like, what are you doing bringing gifts here? Like, you guys don't belong here. Y'all are church people. You don't belong here. And we just told him, hey, we know that you don't typically see church people here, but, you're the people that God cares about. He cares about the people that are in this club. And so that's why we're here, to just share the love. And it was so shocking to him. And we just began sharing, and we said, hey, can we pray? And all of a sudden, it was like the parking lot guy. He came to be in a servant. He took off his hat and bowed his head. And then all the women are just kind of like, they're arriving to their job, and they're seeing this circle of people gather.
Wow.
And we're just praying, and we're playing blessing over them. And you just begin to see the women begin to cry. The Lord begins to touch them. It's probably one of the first times that they've felt cared for, loved on. And, we don't know what their situation is and how they wound up there.
Right.
But I guarantee you they're going to remember that night. And
so it sounds like intervention is less about rescuing people and finding them in dark places and snatching them out and removing them, and more about, as you've said, developing a relationship and just embodying the love of Jesus in that place. Would you say that was a true statement?
Yeah, definitely. Unless we do encounter someone who's, a minor, then we've called law enforcement several times. And that's something that we do immediately. But a lot of them have fake IDs, and it creates all sort of. We haven't really been able to. They're not as out in the open as
Right. Yeah. Well, so for those who are listening to this podcast or watching this podcast on YouTube, they've heard how sex trafficking works in cantinas here in Houston in particular. So they might be fired up, right? They might say, okay, I want to do something about this. I want to make an impact. This is an injustice in my own neighborhood, and I have to end it. I have to be a part of this. What is one way, or maybe a couple of ways even, I don't know, however many ways. What's something that the listeners and the viewers can do to make a difference?
Yeah, if it's in your community, you can just be aware of it. Take that first initial step to get educated, understand how this works. In this podcast, we've outlined sort of what cantinas look like. But there's a larger legal actions that can be taken against these places that, we just haven't really figured out yet. And so there are people like in the insurance agency, or even in, I don't know, like fire safety or health safety, ways that we can, address these places
Yeah.
so that law enforcement can come in.
Or like
and
we talked
do-
about earlier, TABC has been so
TABC.
instrumental. Yeah.
Yeah, and just being the eyes and seeing what's happening, writing down stuff that you're seeing happening. Women in these vans are always being brought to this
Yeah.
location, and so being educated, being aware, and then whenever we start back with interventions, I would say if you are a Spanish speaker, we desperately need Spanish speakers to go on intervention. I would say maybe 50 to 60% of the women in cantinas and men in cantinas are Latin American, and they mostly speak Spanish.
Right. Right.
And so we've had great success when we've had Spanish speakers go into cantinas, and we're also, partnering with churches in that area to recommend people to go there for other resources. And so if you are a church that has a focus on, the Latin American community, we need you to link arms with us and with the community to help reach out to people in cantinas.
That's great. So we are, just for clarification, we are recording this podcast in the midst of a global pandemic. And so currently at this moment when we're recording, interventions are on pause, but they won't stay that way. Like when it's safe for everyone, for our volunteers, mostly, we will relaunch intervention. So in that case, when interventions are operating normally, how would somebody join an intervention team?
Yeah, so to join our intervention, it's super easy. You just go to elijahrising.org, and you can press on the menu tab. There's a button that says intervention. And we have multiple interventions throughout the city, but cantinas, we're mainly going to cantinas in Houston intervention, Northwest intervention.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that's our conversation about how trafficking works, at least the first episode, focusing on cantinas. Thanks, David, for being here. And so, I just want to mention one more time, visit our website, elijahrising.org, for more information, for other podcast episodes and all sorts of other stuff, blog posts, and how to find out about the intervention signups and van tours and things like that. Also, I want to encourage you to visit the Museum of Modern Day Slavery, where we have multiple installments of how trafficking works here and abroad and historically. You can check out the museum. So also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, all the platforms, and subscribe to the podcast. If this has been an impactful episode for you, come back and tell a friend, share it. Subscribe, share, like, comment, and we want to hear from you. Are there questions about this work that you want to hear us discuss? Are there guests you would like to see on the podcast? Let us know, comment, send us a message, and we will see you on the next episode of the Elijah Rising podcast.